Is this the worst decision of Lewis Hamilton's career? The seven-time champion came to Ferrari as the great hope, and in Barcelona he lived his most frustrating career. What is happening within the most legendary F1 team? Formula One's 2025 season began with a huge expectation around a single man, Lewis Hamilton. After more than a decade linked to Mercedes, the seven-time world champion made the decision that paralyzed the paddock and electrified the tifosi. Dress in red. His arrival to Ferrari was not only interpreted as a bold movement, but as the final act of a legendary race, in search of the last trophy that distinguishes him from all others, the 8th World Championship. The narrative was perfect. An iconic pilot, a mythical team, and an opportunity to restore the glory of Maranello. But in the Barcelona circuit, that story broke into 1,000 pieces. The Spain Grand Prix was not just one more race. It was a brutal mirror that reflected all the cracks that Ferrari tried to hide. Hamilton ended in the 6th position, a figure that might seem acceptable on paper, until the circumstances that surrounded him are observed. He was overcome in the final laps by Nico Hülkenberg, a pilot who competes with a Sauber, a car that in the theory should not even dream of passing over a Ferrari. But Hamilton's SF-25 was not a competitive car. It was chaos on wheels. It was not a lack of rhythm in classification or a specific error in the strategy. It was, in the words of Lewis himself, the worst experience in terms of balance he had had in his entire career. A devastating statement that leaves no margin to interpretation. And he didn't stop there. When asked what positive aspects he could get the weekend, he replied with a single word: zero. This response, brief but sheer, shook the foundations of the team. Because when a champion like Hamilton loses confidence, the rebound effect can be devastating. Not only for your personal performance, but for the collective moral of the entire team. The image was powerful. A confused, frustrated Hamilton, looking at his car as if he were a stranger. In a team like Ferrari, where every centimeter of the car is examined with obsession and each result is a national issue in Italy, this type of statements do not go unnoticed. And even less when they come from the man called to lead the technical and competitive rebirth of the rampante Cavallino. Beyond performance, the GP of Spain presented a disconnection between what Hamilton expected from Ferrari and what Ferrari is currently in a position to offer. His signing had been seen as a symbol of authority, experience, and technical development. But in Barcelona, the only thing seen was an unpredictable car and a pilot trapped in a context that fails to understand. And the most disturbing thing is that, if this has happened in just the 9th race of the season, what awaits us in the remaining? Is Ferrari building for the future, or simply surviving the present? This is the type of doubts that, once they settle in the head of a pilot like Hamilton, are difficult to eradicate. The disaster lived by Hamilton in the Spain Grand Prix was not the result of chance or an isolated ruling. It was the crudest manifestation of a structural problem that has been being taken from the birth of the SF-25. This car, which should represent an evolutionary leap with respect to its predecessor, has ended up becoming a perfect example of how a bad technical decision can compromise a whole season. To understand the collapse of the car in Barcelona, it is necessary to look beyond what happened on the track. Ferrari made a daring decision and, as is being demonstrated, erroneous, completely redesign its rear suspension system, adopting a pull rod scheme that it only shares with Haas, its technical client. This configuration, chosen with the objective of improving the aerodynamic efficiency of diffuser and flow under the ground, has had severe side effects on the mechanical behavior of the car, especially in slow and sock curves, where traction, longitudinal balance, and braking stability are fundamental. In simple terms, Ferrari built a car that depends on extremely specific conditions to perform. The SF-25 needs a very close operation window for its components to work in harmony. The slightest deviation in track temperature, tire pressure, or soil height triggers a chain reaction that makes it an erratic, unpredictable, and even dangerous car for the pilot. In Barcelona, the problem was further aggravated by the characteristics of the circuit. Long and demanding curves in the management of the aerodynamic balance, such as 3 or 9, and constant load changes in the rear of the car. All this highlighted the inability of the SF-25 to adapt to real race conditions, especially when the car was with a full tank, in crosswind conditions and progressive degradation in the tires. Hamilton suffered all that and more. The car not only did not respond to the changes in tuning, but directly lost traction in key moments, forcing it to modify its pilot style on the march. He could not trust the back when braking, nor had stability in the exit of curves. Each turn became an act of survival rather than competition. And the worst thing is that Ferrari could not explain why this happened. Neither he, neither his track engineer, nor Vasseur himself had immediate answers. The car didn't talk to them, or worse, I lied to them. The comparison with his partner Charles Leclerc makes it even more serious. While the Monegasco managed to scratch a podium, Hamilton was out of the top 5. And although Leclerc also reported problems and limitations, his car seemed at least moderately functional. This raises another worrying technical question. Is SF-25 an inconsistent car between units? Is there a significant difference between the two chassis? Or is it simply a matter of individual piloting style adaptation? Whatever the answer, the truth is that Ferrari does not have time for experiments. The lack of correlation between the simulator data, the wind tunnel and the royal track has reappeared as an echo of the worst years of the Scuderia. This problem is not just technical, it is philosophical. It is a symptom that Ferrari still does not find a clear identity as a monoplace builder under the current regulation. Barcelona was not an anomaly. It was a diagnosis. And if Ferrari does not act urgently and precisely, the SF-25 will be marked as another car in the long list of Maranello concept failures in the modern era. What happened in the Spanish Grand Prix transcends the mere sports field. It is a turning point, a moment that tests not only the technical structure of Ferrari, but the very viability of the project that built around Lewis Hamilton. Because when a pilot of his caliber launches such sharp statements, it is not just a criticism of the car. It is a warning. A message between lines that resonates both in Maranello and throughout the paddock. Ferrari has invested millions, reputation and hopes in the figure of Hamilton. His signing was more than a blow of media effect. It was a declaration of intentions. They wanted to change internal culture, even more decision, bringing someone with a champion mentality to demand the best of all, from engineers to the last mechanic. But if you do not deliver the tools, all that becomes pressure without reward. And the pressure without results in Ferrari is quickly transformed into chaos. For Hamilton, this scenario is not new, but deeply frustrating. He already lived similar situations in McLaren in his last years and in Mercedes when the W13 collapsed in 2022. But the difference is now the context. It is at the decline of his career he does not have time for long processes or for experimental reconstructions. Ferrari arrived to win, not to reform a structure again from its foundations. Every lost weekend is not just a sports failure, it is a less opportunity to reach the 8th title. And here enters a silent but critical factor: trust. Hamilton is a pilot who needs to feel that his team responds, that there is real progress even if it is slow, that technical meetings make sense, that your feedback is heard and applied. But in Barcelona, what he saw was disorganization, disability of diagnosis, and a car that responded with whim. That wears. Because the problem is not only to lose a career, but the feeling of being trapped in a cycle of errors without exit. From the team's perspective, the problem multiplies. Because if the SF-25 does not work for Hamilton, the star pilot, the face of the new project, the media signing, how do they hold the narrative that Ferrari is on the right path? How do they convince the world, sponsors, their own engineers, that what they are building is competitive? In addition, internally, this type of results generates tension. Comparisons between pilots are inevitable. Leclerc climbs to the podium while Hamilton struggles to stay in top 10. Voices begin to emerge. Is the car the problem, or is the pilot who fails to adapt? Has Ferrari wrong betting on a decline star? Has a technical and symbolic leadership conflict been generated within the team? And if this trend continues, it would not be unreasonable to imagine that internal divisions begin to emerge. Setup decisions designed for one or another pilot, divergences in technical updates, or even fight for the control of the car development. All that has already happened before in Ferrari. History is repeated cyclically when the results do not accompany. And the arrival of Hamilton, who had to consolidate a strong and united team, could end up catalyzing a new stage of internal friction if the results do not straighten. What we have witnessed in the 2025 Grand Prix is not just a bad result in the timesheet. It is a visible symptom of a deeper disease. A reflection of Ferrari's conceptual limitations, of poorly channeled pressure, and how even the greatest champions can be trapped in an environment that is not up to their ambitions. Lewis Hamilton did not come to Ferrari to fight for a 6th place, or fight with mid-grill cars. He came to write the last big chapter of his career. And for now, that chapter is being written with frustration ink. But the big question is, this marks the beginning of the end of his adventure in Maranello? Or is it simply a critical curve on a path that can still lead to success? Ferrari's story in Formula One is full of dramatic moments, deep falls and miraculous resurgence. And Hamilton's trajectory is woven with resilience, evolution and almost supernatural capacity to reinvent itself. Are we facing an inevitable collision between two incompatible worlds? Or can this alliance still find its equilibrium point? That is the question that I throw you now. I want to know what you think. Do you think Hamilton made the right decision to sign for Ferrari? Or do you see signs that this relationship is condemned from the beginning? Can the team reverse the course with technical updates? Or are we facing another lost season for the most iconic motor racing? I invite you to leave your analysis in the comments. It is not just about discussing results, but about sharing a vision. Because Formula One, beyond speed, is a sport where strategic decisions, human factors, and technical elements live in a complex dance that changes in each curve. And if this type of technical analysis interests you, subscribe and stay attentive.